All right, this is just a skill needed for kind of like the series that I'm trying to work on of building a house and saving some time. It's not, yeah, I don't just do these videos just to have another, here's how to build a house. I see a lot of framers doing things that could it to me is a waste of time. But anyway, so this particular, I guess you could call it a sub skill, is I call it plate step off. So if you have your plans and you want to lay out an exterior wall, you'll get your measurements, and let's say I want to get 25 feet worth of plate here. The way you would do it in the method I have is you pull your tape out, and you want to have a flexible tape like a metal tape or something like that, and just pull out a bunch of it and lay it on the ground, because you don't want to be having to unspool it. You'll see why in a second. You want to take a lot of care to make sure that when you pull this tape out, you're keeping it tight and you're not moving it from your thumb. So I'm going to slide this down so you can see it. Here's the end of the board right here. Now, I've got 7 foot 3.5, okay? So I'm done with this piece. That's going to be one run. I'm going to put 7 foot 3.5 down here on this end. 7 foot 3.5. Now I'm stepping off that measurement. I'm gonna go to 25 feet, okay? So now I've got 13, 11. I can't see. And just over a half. Just a bump over half. 13, 11, and just over a half. All right, so I'm done with that one. 13, 11, just a bump over a half. 13. All right, now I got 20 foot 10. Money. 20 foot 10 down here. Where I say I'm going to 25. So now, there I am. 25 feet. So that's my cutoff right there. So these three boards, this finish out. Now, that's the skill that you want to be able to do to get on your horse, your measure, your board, the distance, how much board you need to go on that plate. Okay, now that's not all there is to it, but that's really the skill that you want to understand. But the rest of it would be, if I'm building here, let's say I go to 10 foot. So I've got my length here. Now I can just write, I can write 7, 3, and 3/4 right here. Now this is not the first board that I measured, but this lets me know what this total board length is. Now I got to keep my boards in order. But if I were to be laying this out from the beginning, I would come down here, and sometimes you burn a 1/2 inch for plywood. Some people don't, but I would mark, and this tape doesn't have 16 inches on center, but I'm just going to put it so that's 16 would be. This 12 foot. So it'd be 14. I'm wrong. Yeah, no. 14 inches or 1 foot 14. That would be my on-center spacing. So I would mark this first board out with 16 inches, and then I would also, if I am able to get my windows and door open, and depending on where the measurements are taking me from. I wish I had a plan here so I could kind of go over that. But I would also want to mark that On the plates as I'm going, I want to mark wall intersections, and I'd also, where that intersection goes, I would want to put what's the measurement from the nearest wall. So if I'm not 5 feet, but say I was 12 foot from this side, I would want to mark it to the near side and say, this wall intersection is going to be 12 foot 5 inches. And then, so that way when I see the measurement there, I can just go from the other wall, I can hook that and go 12 foot 5 inches to where the other end of the board, the other end of the wall, I can measure right to it and put a pencil mark there for later on when that wall goes in. I know right where to butt it to. I can nail that other end down, and then I can get maybe 2 more spots along that wall to line it up better and nail that down. So my wall will be in line with the outside wall. So you're going to want to do wall intersections. You're going to want to do on-center layout, and really anything else inside of this wall right on this plate. And then as a whole package, I would give that to my framer and have him go and install that wall and start building it. Now that would be, I can decide if I want to do my, both plates. Now you would want your first 16-foot section, whether you're going to do your 8-foot first or because you're going to stagger that double top plate. So I want these to be identical on the bottom. So I may have to cut them off to be exactly on 8-foot or 16-foot. So that would take a little extra, and all that would be was, as I'm stepping off this one plate here, now I come down here and I will mark it at 8 foot. I run my saw down it, and that's my first step off. My next step off is going to start at 8 foot, at 8 foot, and then go to 16 or what have you. Double top plate will be staggering the opposite. My first one will be 16 foot, but then I would also burn, depending on how you're laying your plates out. So usually your first wall is just run long, and then you cut the double top plate back. So we wouldn't burn that. You would burn the measurement of 3.5 on one end, and then it'd be 7 foot, 5 and whatever inch, whatever that is. You go to 8 foot, and then that's where that board would be cut. Double top plates are not quite as important because you don't have a stud exactly bearing on it. And that ends that teaching. You want to be real precise when you're because sometimes you will split, in between a 16th and it's a 32nd. So you want to remember a fat 32nd or a skinny 32nd, because normally, if the building's 50 foot long, you're going to step four sections of 16 foot off. It can build up, that little bit can build up to maybe a 1/4 inch. If that's the case, you could just trim it off at the end. But, what does this method do? It allows you to kind of pre-package your walls, and instead of, I have my line snapped, and I'm going to have something about snapping lines as well. But if I'm going to go pre-put my plates down, all I'm really doing is using that to get my measurement for my finish out, which is a little piece of the cutoff at the end, and doing it this way, it allows me to do everything pretty quickly right here on the benches. And I know what my finish out's going to be. I've got my layouts. If it's just me working, and I know that this wall, this is an exterior wall here, and I got an exterior wall over here, and I label everything, I can make a package of walls here, and I can make another one here, and then I can put scribe over my on center layouts across all my walls as I'm building them. It saves time in having to go with that tape measure every time and do. I only need to do it one time on this first wall, and then every subsequent wall after that, I can just use a square and transfer everything over. It's pretty efficient. So, and then, you know, you'll get another training on the line snapping. But if I were to go ahead and throw this down in place, I don't have to do anything on the concrete or on my subfloor. I can already start putting studs in because it's all on the plates. Also, if you really can really get a grasp on what you're doing, you can lay out fascia. You can also step the fascia off too, because we know the end of the wall plate here, we know that the overhang is going to be a certain amount. And so that's what the fascia is. So I can step that fascia off as well. I can put layouts for the fascia tails. That's important because if I can pull those fascia tails on center spacing, it may clear up some bows up in the tops of the rafters. You can lay out your ridge. Important to lay that ridge out so that, you know, when you're up there or you lift that ridge up in the air, you know, we're not wasting time or, you know, effort, putting more effort into doing something than what's necessary is, you know, depending on where you are, that can mean a lot. Tiring the guys out in the heat. You know, it's just slowing people down for something that may have to happen later on where we need our energy. The more energy we have, the faster we're going to do all this and build. So, okay, so this is just, like I said, this is just one small little thing to add to a larger thing that I'm going to come out with about really starting from zero and building, you know, and building the building. I'm going to have a class on squaring a foundation up, a kind of a real like no-brainer how to square up a foundation. Sometimes there can be a lot of head scratching in that. It should be no time wasted on squaring a foundation. Another one, and a lot of this is based upon working by yourself. I've spent a lot of time on a crew, but a lot of that time was you wouldn't get points for asking for help. So I've developed a lot of these methods in order to get things done by yourself. And you save a lot of money doing that depending on how big your company is. I've never had a company. I've just been involved in framing. But if I was to have a company, I doubt I would hire anybody, honestly. So anyway, this is kind of my first video, and there's more to follow with it. But the setup is going to take longer. So hope you kind of get a little bit of this method is called stepping off wall plates. So, alrighty.